You know what's exhausting? Constantly feeling like you're running out of time, like everyone else got a head start and you're still at the starting line trying to figure out which direction to run. If you feel behind in life, this isn't about ambition, it's about something much darker that's been quietly suffocating you. You look around and everyone seems to have it figured out. They have careers that make sense, relationships that are stable, lives that look like they're progressing in some clear, linear direction. And then there's you, still trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, even though you're well past the age when that should have been decided. Still single when your friends are getting married or having kids. Still renting when people younger than you are buying homes. Still at the starting point of things that others finished years ago. And the worst part isn't even where you are. It's the feeling that accompanies it. The constant, gnawing sense that you're failing at something everyone else finds easy, that you've somehow missed crucial instructions that everyone else received, that time is moving forward and you're standing still, watching opportunities pass by while you're stuck in the same place you've been for years. And here's what makes this feeling so suffocating. You can't talk about it without sounding like you're complaining, without sounding ungrateful or entitled, or like you think you deserve more than you've earned. So you keep it inside. You smile when people ask how you're doing. You celebrate other people's milestones while quietly dying inside because each one reminds you of how far behind you are. You watch your friends' lives unfold on social media, their promotions and engagements and achievements, and you feel this specific kind of grief. Not jealousy exactly, more like mourning. Mourning the version of yourself you thought you'd be by now, the life you thought you'd be living. The person you were supposed to become, but somehow never did. So what's actually happening here? Because if this were just about comparing yourself to others, you could simply stop scrolling and the feeling would go away. But it doesn't. The feeling lives deeper than social media. It lives in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts, when you measure your life against some invisible timeline that you can't even articulate, but somehow know you're failing to meet. The truth is, feeling behind in life isn't about where you actually are. It's about the gap between where you are and where you believe you should be. And that gap is psychological, not factual. Psychologists call this temporal comparison anxiety. It's when you measure your present self against an idealized future self you constructed years ago. Maybe when you were younger, you had this vision of who you'd be at 30 or 40 or whatever age you are now. And that vision included certain achievements, certain milestones, certain markers of success. And now you're here at that age and you don't match the vision. So instead of adjusting the vision to match reality, you feel like you failed, like you're behind schedule on a timeline that was always arbitrary to begin with. But here's where it gets deeper. This feeling isn't just internal, it's culturally programmed. Society has very specific scripts for how life is supposed to unfold. Graduate by 22, career established by 25, married by 30, kids by 35, financial stability by 40. And if you deviate from that script, if your life doesn't follow that neat linear progression, you're made to feel like something's wrong with you, like you're behind. But behind what exactly? Behind a made-up timeline that only ever worked for a specific type of person in a specific type of circumstance that may have nothing to do with your actual life, your actual challenges, your actual path. Research shows that people who feel chronically behind often have what's called a prevention focus rather than a promotion focus. Instead of moving toward goals because you want them, you're trying to avoid the shame of not having achieved them. You're not excited about the future. You're anxious about falling further behind. And that anxiety doesn't motivate you. It paralyzes you. Because when you're constantly focused on what you haven't done, on how far behind you are, you can't actually move forward. You're stuck in this loop of self-judgment that consumes all the energy you'd need to make progress. There's also something called social comparison theory at play. Humans naturally compare themselves to others to evaluate their own standing. But in the age of social media, we're not comparing ourselves to our immediate community anymore. We're comparing ourselves to everyone, to the most successful people in every field, to the highlight reels of thousands of lives. And our brains aren't equipped to handle that. We're wired to compare ourselves to maybe 100 people we actually know, not to millions of carefully curated success stories. So we're constantly measuring ourselves against standards that aren't even real, against lives that are heavily edited, against timelines that don't account for the struggles we don't see. Maybe you've also noticed how this feeling affects your decision-making. Because when you feel behind, every choice becomes weighted with urgency. You can't just explore. You can't just try things. You can't afford to waste time on something that might not work out because you're already so far behind. So you either freeze, unable to commit to anything because what if it's the wrong choice, or you rush, jumping into things out of desperation rather than genuine desire. And both approaches keep you stuck. Freezing means you don't move at all. Rushing means you move in directions that aren't actually right for you, which eventually puts you back at square one, feeling even more behind than when you started. Here's what needs to be understood. The feeling of being behind is often rooted in something that happened much earlier. Maybe you had a delayed start because of circumstances outside your control. Mental health struggles, family obligations, financial constraints, trauma that took years to process. You weren't being lazy or unmotivated, you were surviving. But society doesn't account for survival years. It doesn't pause the timeline for healing. So by the time you're ready to actually start building your life, you look around and everyone else is already ahead. And instead of recognizing that you were playing a different game entirely, you just feel like you lost the one everyone else was winning. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe you spent your 20s doing what you were supposed to do, following the script, and then realized it wasn't what you actually wanted, so you had to start over. Had to undo years of momentum in the wrong direction before you could even begin moving in the right one. And now you're building from scratch, at an age when you thought you'd be established. And that feels like failure, even though it's actually courage. Even though choosing to start over, to align your life with your actual values rather than inherited expectations, is one of the hardest, bravest things a person can do. But it doesn't feel brave. It just feels behind. Neuroscientifically, there's something happening in your brain when you're stuck in this feeling. Your anterior cingulate cortex, the part responsible for error detection, is hyperactive. It's constantly scanning for evidence that you're failing, that you're not measuring up, that you're falling short. And it finds evidence everywhere because that's what it's looking for. Someone younger than you achieves something? Evidence. Someone at your age has more than you? Evidence. A birthday passes and you haven't hit the milestones you expected. Evidence. Your brain is building a case against you, collecting data that confirms you're behind and ignoring everything that would suggest otherwise. But here's the cruel part. The more you feel behind, the harder it becomes to actually make progress. Because feeling behind creates shame, and shame is paralyzing. When you're ashamed of where you are, you hide, you isolate, you stop taking risks, because risks mean potential failure, and you're already failing enough. You stop sharing your goals because what if you don't achieve them? What if people judge you for even trying when you're so far behind everyone else? So you stay small, you stay quiet, and you stay stuck. The very feeling that makes you desperate to catch up is the same feeling that prevents you from moving forward. Maybe you've also noticed how exhausting it is to constantly perform okayness. To act like you're fine when people ask how you're doing. To celebrate other people's wins while privately spiraling about your own lack of progress. To pretend you're content with where you are when every day feels like evidence that you're wasting your life. That performance takes energy. Energy you could be using to actually build something. But instead, you're spending it on maintaining the illusion that you're not as behind as you feel. Research also shows a connection between feeling behind and perfectionism. Not the healthy kind that drives excellence, the maladaptive kind that prevents starting. Because if you're already behind, anything you do now has to be perfect to make up for lost time. It has to be exceptional. It has to compensate for the years you feel you've wasted. So the bar is impossibly high. And you don't start, because starting with something imperfect feels like falling even further behind. So you wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect circumstances. And while you wait, time keeps moving, and the gap keeps widening. Here's what people who feel behind rarely admit. There's also grief in this, real, profound grief. Grief for the life you thought you'd be living by now, for the person you thought you'd be, for the dreams that had expiration dates you've already passed, for the versions of success you've had to let go of because they're no longer accessible from where you are. That grief is legitimate, and it needs to be acknowledged, not dismissed. You're not being dramatic, you're mourning something real, the future you planned for that isn't going to happen. At least not in the way you imagined. But here's where the psychology gets important. The feeling of being behind is a story, not reality. It's a narrative you're telling yourself based on external markers that were never designed to account for your specific life, your specific challenges, your specific path. The timeline you're measuring yourself against is a cultural construct, not a law of nature. There is no cosmic schedule. There is no universal checklist. There's just your life, unfolding in its own time, at its own pace, in response to circumstances you didn't choose and challenges others never had to face. So what does it take to stop feeling behind? Not achieving more, not catching up, not finally hitting those milestones you think will make you feel okay. It takes something harder. It takes releasing the timeline. It takes accepting that your life isn't going to look like anyone else's, and that's not a failure, it's just reality. It takes recognizing that progress isn't linear, that healing isn't wasted time, that starting over isn't starting behind, that wherever you are is exactly where you are, and judging it doesn't change it. It means redefining what success looks like for you specifically. Not success according to your parents' expectations or society's standards, or your younger self's naive assumptions about how life works, but success based on your actual values, your actual circumstances, your actual capacity. Maybe success for you right now is just surviving, just showing up, just not giving up despite how hard this feels. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. It also means practicing what psychologists call self-compassion, which isn't about lowering your standards or giving up on goals. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show someone you love who's struggling. Would you tell a friend they're behind? Would you measure their worth by arbitrary timelines? Would you judge them for taking longer to heal, to rebuild, to find their way? Or would you remind them that everyone's path is different, that comparison is meaningless, that they're doing the best they can with what they have? Here's the truth that might be hard to hear. You're not actually behind. You're exactly where you are. And where you are is a result of everything you've been through, everything you've survived, every choice you made with the information you had at the time. Some people have advantages you didn't have. Some people had easier paths. Some people got lucky breaks you didn't get. And comparing your behind the scenes to their highlight reel will only make you miserable. It won't make you move faster. It won't make you feel better. It will just keep you stuck in a story that isn't serving you. Maybe what you need isn't to catch up. Maybe what you need is to stop running a race you never agreed to step off the track entirely and start walking a path that's actually yours. To build a life based on what matters to you, not what impresses others. To measure progress by your own growth, not by external milestones. To accept that your timeline is your own, and it doesn't need to match anyone else's to be valid. And maybe you also need to hear this. The fact that you feel behind means you still care. You still want more. You still have dreams. You're not apathetic or resigned. You're just exhausted from trying to catch up to a finish line that keeps moving. But caring is not the same as failing. Wanting more is not evidence that you're not enough. The desire itself is proof that you're still in the game, still hoping, still reaching. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to honor. So maybe the question isn't, how do I catch up? Maybe the question is, what am I actually working toward? And is it mine? Or is it a borrowed dream I've been chasing because I thought I was supposed to? Because the only timeline that matters is the one you choose for yourself. The only milestones that count are the ones that align with your actual values. And the only person you're really in competition with is who you are yesterday. Not who someone else is today, not who you thought you'd be by now. Just who you're becoming, slowly, imperfectly, in your own time. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be to get where you're going. And where you're going doesn't have a deadline. It just has a direction. So stop looking at everyone else's map. Start drawing your own. And trust that the path that's right for you doesn't look like anyone else's, because it's yours. And that's the only thing that's ever mattered. If this hit you, if you felt seen in your struggle, leave a comment. What would change if you stopped measuring yourself against everyone else? And if you want more of these honest reflections, subscribe. We're just getting started.